have a 2.175 carat piece of color change garnet that seems to be shaped like a marquee. This very rare color change garnet is from a deposit in the Taita Taveta area in Kenya. The color is purplish red in an incandescent light, changing to a bluish green in fluorescent light, which is very similar to alexandrite. For expensive pieces of gem rough like this, it is important to examine the shape of the rough and to select a gem cutting diagram that resembles the shape of the rough. In this case, a marquee shape. This will normally result in the least amount of rough being lost during the cutting process. Garnet is named after the pomegranate fruit, and most people associate red with the color of garnet. And in fact, most garnets are red in color, but most is not all, and garnets make up a wide range of colors. Tsavorite garnet is a green garnet and is highly prized, as is the lighter mint green garnet, as is the Fanta orange spessartite garnet, as is the recent discovery of a purple garnet from Mozambique. So not only is garnet not just a red gemstone, but it comes in almost every color of the rainbow. In fact, it used to be said that garnet came in every color except blue. That is, until 1998, when blue garnet was discovered in the Bikaili mines located in South Madagascar. Not only was this newly discovered variety of garnet blue, but it was one of those very rare types of gemstones, a color change gemstone. The best color change garnets so far seem to be from the Bikaili mines. However, color change garnets have been found all over the globe, including Norway and in the USA. However, most of the color change garnets from Norway are very small, less than a carat, uncut. There were some exceptions, for example a 24.87 carat color change stone from Norway which showed up around 1979, but that was a rare exception. In the USA, some garnets from Idaho have shown a strong color shift from red to purplish red, but note that in the gem trade the term color change and color shift are two specific terms that mean different things. Color change gemstones will have a strong and clear change of color, like from green to blue, while color shift gemstones will have a less strong shift of color, like from red to purplish red. Color change garnets are not normally heated or enhanced in any way. Garnets have been used as gemstones for thousands of years. In fact, a garnet beaded necklace was found in the grave of a young man dating back to 3000 BC. Garnet is the birthstone for the month of January, and January babies are lucky to have such a wide variety of colors for a birthstone. I think the peridot babies may be a little jealous. Unfortunately, many chain jewelry stores only stock very dark red garnets in their inventory. Buyers should always be careful when buying garnet, particularly red garnet, to make sure that the piece of jewelry is not too dark. As I mentioned, because color change garnet is expensive, you need to carefully assess the shape of the rough to determine what cut to use on the gemstone. This piece of rough looks like a marquee shape, so cutting a marquee cut will result in the least amount of loss of carat weight. It would be foolish to cut this stone into a round shape, for example, because of the extra carat weight that would be lost. If the rough was relatively inexpensive, you could pretty much cut it into any shape you want. But with expensive rough, it's important to evaluate the rough carefully and let the shape of the rough be a factor in determining the type of cut. So a marquee cut it is. Now for you new cutters, in my personal opinion, you should not cut a marquee as one of your first stones. My recommendation for new cutters is to progress by starting with a standard round brilliant using inexpensive rough, then move to a square step cut, then to a rectangle or emerald cut, then a trilliant, and then tackle an oval or a marquee, and then it's pretty much game on. But again, that's my opinion, and if you want the extra challenge, which a marquee cut will definitely give you, go for it. The problem with a marquee cut, as well as an oval cut using a brilliant design, is that you have to get the length and width measurements exactly correct when you cut, or you're going to have problems getting your facets to line up properly. And the first place you'll notice this issue is when you're trying to level the girdle. So if you're cutting a marquise cut or an oval, and your girdle is looking more like the Rocky Mountains instead of a nice level girdle, check your length and width ratios with the gem diagram, and you'll likely find that you have the wrong ratios. To cut this color change garnet, I have chosen a design by the famous Robert Long. He named this marquee design Marquise. Nice. This design can be found online at facetdiagrams.org. And if you have any questions on how to read this gem cutting design, refer to my two-part video on how to read gem cutting designs. So I won't spend a lot of time here going over the design. So let's begin cutting. We need to follow crown instruction A, which calls for us to cut at the 96 tooth and the 48 tooth of our 96 gear index. We know to use the 96 gear index from our gem design instruction sheet, and cutting using these two teeth of the index gear is shown here in the instructions. All right, this is color change garnet, a very rare version of garnet. Under normal lighting, it's a purple, dark purple, and under ultraviolet light, it's a kind of a mint green. Okay, so I'm going to mount the color change garnet onto the dot. So what I do first is I get my kind of putty and I make a kind of a pancake, and I grab a flat dot for the bottom that's bigger or as big as the stone, and I put the putty on top, make sure that's tight. And that's because the bottom half of the stone is rough. It's got, various shapes, so it'll go into the putty and help make it flat, because the top flat part is what we want to put onto the dot. So the top dot, right, initially I use a dot that's about as big as the stone. It's not the one we're going to glue it to, but to set it up and find center so we have less waste, I'm going to use this. In this case, it's a 5mm dot, flat. So we bring the dot down on the top, and then because it's as large as a stone, it's fairly easy to figure out where you want the stone centered. It looks to me like that's going to be centered a little bit more this way. Then you gently kind of push the putty up a little bit so it holds the stone a little bit in place. Make sure that's where you want it. You change out to the actual dot that you're going to use, which is much smaller. This 5mm dot would not work. I'd end up, as I grind the stone, I'd end up grinding into the dot. So I need a smaller dot. So I have a 2mm dot that I'm going to use for the stone. So I put that in the top of our transfer jig, push it down, and now stone centered. It would be harder to center it this way if I'd started this way, because there's so much stone hanging out on each end. It'd be a little more difficult. So that little trick helps have a lot less waste. Now we're going to apply our Loctite 404 super glue. I'm going to get a drop out there and push the dot into the stone, tighten it up, and move it around, letting the super glue, before it sets, make sure it makes good contact with the stone and with the dot. We'll let it set overnight and be ready to cut our color change garnet. Right there is aligns the flattest part to the 96 index here and cuts right across. So this is the best we can do with this color change garnet. So we'll make our first cut at 96 index, 35-degree angle, and we'll start cutting. Now I'm going to deviate from the instructions for this particular cut, which the designer made. On this instruction, it's the crown being cut first. And for some reason, the girdle doesn't get cut in the design until you start cutting the pavilion. So I'll cut the crown first, that's fine. But I am going to cut the girdle now, way ahead of what the designer said. That way I'll know the size of the stone before I get too far along. Turn on my drip, get a nice good drip to get a lot of this swarf off the lap. I put in my sponge to help reduce the spillage over from the water, and we'll cut the girdle. Okay, stop the presses. We had a problem with this stone. There was an inclusion, which is not uncommon with color change garnet. It's right here. It's a little fracture on this half of the stone going all the way up. If I were to leave this as the crown, that fracture is going to show up on the table. I decided to switch everything around and make this the bottom half of the stone, or the pavilion. I don't normally do that in the middle of cutting the stones. We did a 180-degree change. This became the pavilion, or bottom half of the stone. Sorry about changing everything at the last minute, but there was no choice. We're going to move on and polish this and then move to the crown. Okay, I'm going to polish our color change garnet with aluminum oxide. I'm going to use a Ultra Lap that I got from Ultra Tec, although you can buy Ultra Laps from a number of lapidary stores. These are disposable discs that has aluminum oxide on it. The way you know which side to use is one side is shiny and one side's not so shiny. You can see the shinier side. The shiny side goes down. Then you kind of put water over it, run your finger over it to get all the bubbles out from the bottom side and make it a nice nice contact with your master lap. Put the stone where you're going to work with it on the lap, which is about here. I want to work with it right about here. Your lap goes in the direction that the stone is and the quill is pointing, so you want your lap on a clockwise rotation. A 3000 grit pre-polish with our bat lap is a good pre-polish. So the first tier is done. Now we'll work the remaining tiers on the pavilion, and then the bottom half of our color change garnet will be polished. Finished polishing the pavilion, or bottom half of our color change garnet, with a Ultra Lap aluminum oxide. I find that if I use the Gear Loose bat stick, which is kind of like a big Crayola crayon, and add the aluminum oxide, it has the same micron as the Ultra Lap. Now what I do when I'm finished polishing is I increase the water flow to clean the disc, increase the speed, run my finger over it to get any possible garnet grindings off the lap. Now again, I did add 4 facets because I had to completely switch the plan in the middle of cutting it. I'm glad that happens on video so you can see some of the problems we run into when we're cutting, and possible ways of overcoming them, at least the way I overcome the problem. It may be the wrong way, but to transfer our color change garnet, I picked a V-shaped dot that will fit into the pavilion that we just cut. We put the dots in the transfer jig, tighten up the top dot, push the bottom down. We're going to put 1 drop of super glue on there, push it up, and move the transfer jig around a little bit until the glue sets, semi-sets, which only takes a few seconds. So you want to make sure that you've got some adhesive on the brass and on the stone, both. You may have to turn it over a few times so it doesn't run. And in a few seconds it'll harden up enough, and then we'll leave it for a while. I've got another stone to work on when I finish the other stone, or tomorrow. This one will be ready for us to work on the crown. We've put our color change garnet back into the quill, and we're setting it up so that the girdle is aligned so that the pavilion and the crown are aligned with each other. And what you do is you set your indicator at 2 and you line up that facet. Then you go to the 94 and you check it, tighten it up. You go to the 46 and the 50 teeth on the other side to make sure that you're aligned. You of course have your machine set at 90 degrees, and then you're checking with your loop, and you raise the aperture slightly and lower it, and just want that those 4 facets when you're checking to just touch our milled, perfectly aligned metal block here, so that the facet is flat and that all 4 of those G1 facets are flat, and then you're back in alignment so that when you cut the crown or the top half of the stone, it'll be in alignment with the pavilion or bottom half of the stone. We're going to use the 8000 grit bat lap. We're going to use the Pandemonium 8000 diamond grit from Gear Loose. Now you can use this with water or oil. What you do is you just moisten your finger, work the 8000 grit diamond paste into your lap. Use a very slow drip with it. Set our index to 41.9 and our teeth on our index to the number 2 tooth. Again, a real slow drip. And now we're going to go around our stone with the 8000 diamond grit on a bat lap. We're ready to polish the crown of our color change garnet. I'm going to try the Ultra Laps, not the cerium oxide, this is aluminum oxide. And we'll give this a try. I finished polishing the crown using aluminum oxide on an Ultra Lap, and now I'll take the DOP and set up our machine for faceting the table. Now I will set our stone into the 45-degree tabling adapter, which I have demonstrated in many of my other videos, and then we will cut the table. We're going to use a 3000 grit diamond on a bat lap. We put a very slow drip on our water. We set our speed about 600 RPM. Our Ultra Tec will go up to 1600 RPM, but we just need 600 RPM to do most of the work that we do. We want to check often, and we've got a little bit more to cut with our 3000 grit, and then we use the 8000 grit diamond on a bat lap, then the 14,000 diamond on a bat lap, and then polish it. I deviated from Robert Long's instructions for cutting the crown or upper half of the gemstone. I changed the order so that the facets in instruction C and D were cut first to help level the girdle and set the girdle width. And I moved the instructions for cutting the table to the end, as my personal preference is to almost always cut the table last. The order I cut the crown in was C, D, A, B, E, I, J, G, H, and cutting the table, instruction F, last. The instructions are to cut instruction A first. In this case, I would only have the point of the facet as my guide as I try to set the girdle width. It seems easier to me to use instructions C and D to accomplish setting the girdle width. For this same reason, I moved instructions I and J before G and H. As I said, I moved instruction F, the table, to the end, and maybe that's just my preference. If anyone out there disagrees with the order I cut this stone in, please let me know in the comments. I'm always interested to learn why another approach makes more sense. Thank you, and happy faceting, everyone.